in modern American history. We have lived through 4 elections, 80, 84, 88, and 2000, where Reagan Republicanism won politically, and governing in a Reaganite way has been more successful. So when the left tells us we should drop that which we've seen work and go with that which we've seen fail, I think it'll be easier for us to say thank you very much for your kind advice, and we're going to pass on it this time. So our challenge now on the entitlement issue, Medicare, Medicaid, on health care, pensions, Social Security, government pensions, and education, K through 12, and universities, is that we need to reform those rather than cut them. If you stand up and say, I'm going to cut education, you're going to have a problem politically. If you move towards school choice, it's an easier sell. With Medicare, with pensions, we need to move from defined benefit pensions to defined contribution pensions. This is what Bush was talking about with Social Security, not cutting the benefits, not raising taxes, but moving to fully funded, individually held pensions such as 401ks. The advantage we have now is that most Americans know what a 401k looks like. They know what an IRA looks like. Either they have one, or their brother has one, or their kids or their parents have one. So that it's easier. I mean, if you tried to explain to people, oh, we're going to close down the post office and everyone will use email in 1965, you might have gotten some pushback from people who thought you were closing down the post office without an alternative. Reforming Social Security and allowing people to have 401k, take their FICA taxes and put them in a 401k, you can say that to somebody today and they understand what you're talking about rather than wondering why you're ending Social Security. So at the national level, the 3 major cost to government projects need to be reformed rather than cut. Education, healthcare, and pensions. But the good news is Paul Ryan, who was cited earlier, has actually put a bill together that does all 3 of those things. And I would recommend his legislation highly. The book that I put out called Leave Us Alone, the last couple of chapters is Paul Ryan's legislation. It's nice to write a book that after you've written it, instead of becoming overtaken by events, is actually put into legislative form. I mean, we're obviously working on parallel but different paths, but I do think that he's the Jack Kemp of the future, Paul Ryan, that his views of how we rein in federal spending with entitlements by reforming them to make them pay-as-you-go, fully funded, not fully funded, individually controlled, rather than the pay-as-you-go Ponzi scheme, is actually the way to go at the national level. But with that, thoughts, questions, arguments? Yes?
Why didn't we have a candidate that espoused those? I mean, we didn't have anybody that stood up and said the Reagan principle.
This was an odd election. You had Romney running ahead, Iowa. He gets jumped by Huckabee. Huckabee had 2 things. He had the homeschool movement helping him because of the Parental Rights Amendment, which is a constitutional amendment at the federal level to say parents have the right to raise their kids. They're not allowed to hurt them, but they're otherwise allowed to, no child abuse, but parents have the right to raise their kids. Very big issue with the homeschoolers, and through that to the churches. Add that the fair tax people sent folks to the polls because they wanted a fair tax, retail sales tax guy to win. Governor Huckabee beats Romney. So Romney goes into New Hampshire as a failed candidate, not as the leader. Now, had anybody other than Huckabee defeated Romney, they would be the giant killer, and they'd be the presumed leader. But Huckabee didn't translate. I mean, nobody in New Hampshire goes to church. And so he didn't translate into a state other than a caucus state because he was so limited in his base. So the one guy who was politically sterile, couldn't go forward, beat Romney. However, if Giuliani had been running in New Hampshire, he might have been a candidate. Or he might have taken votes away from, would have taken votes away from McCain, and the game would have gone on. But somebody had convinced Giuliani that he should step out to the men's room during the first 3 or 4 primaries, and he wasn't going to play until Florida when it was over. And so you had McCain win in New Hampshire, then he was the front runner and everybody else. And then it was one guy against everybody else, and then the one guy gets to win. So it was a very fluky bouncing around. I mean, basically McCain stood there and everybody around him felt like dead, and he was the nominee. I am actually very pleased that while McCain was not dead center of the center-right movement once he was the Republican candidate, those of us who might have said, well, I have these following short list of things that are not quite right with the McCain campaign, that we didn't break with him the way Rockefeller did with Goldwater. And the Rockefeller wing of the party committed political suicide when they stabbed Goldwater in the back. Even though Goldwater lost, everyone said, you can't trust those people. And it was the end for Rockefellerism because it wasn't seen as part of the party, part of the movement. And that didn't happen to the broad center-right conservative base, even with a less than perfect candidate. We tried to hold it together and do as well as you could. But I think that, look, a candidate who hadn't come out against drilling in Anwar might have won the entire election on $4 of gasoline. But he'd already triangulated, McCain had already triangulated against the Republican Party on Anwar. So he couldn't use that issue. And so the whole series of challenges. A standard, look, we were running against a guy who's a product, Obama, of the Chicago political machine. You can't beat that. I mean, just outline it. The corrupt Chicago political machine who spends $800,000 to fund the Acorn voting fraud people, remember Chicago, who will raise your taxes and spending, and Chicago's completely opaque. You would have thought that that alone was something that you could beat, but we weren't running a standard issue Reagan Republican, and so it didn't happen for us. But I think we'll go back to that position with any one of a number of candidates. Yeah.
How do you explain the white urban dweller who makes $250,000 and still voted for Obama? He didn't make that $250,000 by being dumb. He's smart. He knows his taxes are going up. Explain that mentality.
That's a very interesting one, and it's a challenge. Not everybody votes their economic interests. Some people were excited about the idea of having the first African-American presidential candidate. The other team made their product cool. We did not. But the other person, I'm not sure they fully understood what's going to happen to them. I mean, the best thing that happens, in terms of the next election, not in terms of the interests of the nation or any group of people, there will be a teaching moment when Obama actually does what Obama intends to do. And again, I don't mean to single out Obama. He's just going to sign the bills. The whack jobs in the House and Senate are going to write them and send them to him, and then he will sign them. So all this talk about, I wonder what he wants to do, I'll tell you what he's going to do. He's going to sign the bills that Barney Frank sends him. That's what he's going to do. Nancy Pelosi will send him stuff. And that is, sorry, Mrs. Giuliani keeps calling me. So, I mean, we went on the website. I don't know if you noticed this, the Obama people took down their policy website Monday morning. We printed it out at ATR, and I had particularly gone in and printed out the one dealing with the Second Amendment. He came out in his policy agenda for reestablishing the assault weapons ban, keeping a list of everybody in the country who buys guns, and this is all printed out. And the NRA took the one about guns and sent it to 4 million people and said, go look at this. And we took it down, and they've removed the whole thing. So now it's just a bunch of fuzzy talk, and the agenda part has been taken down. So we sent it out to the press and radio talk shows and said, you might want to go check, but that which was there on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is not there Monday. So even he's look, he's won the election, it's not like he can get a refund or something. But even now, he doesn't want to quite let you see what his plans are. And so on taxes, I think there'll be a very strong reaction.